The other reason for shortening the meetings to an hour and a half is because I have so little to say. It used to be that I used to joke about me being like Fidel Castro or Khrushchev or one of those guys with the talent to speak for hours and hours, or the affliction, whichever. But as it has become clear to me exactly what it is that has to be done, and it become clear to me that it's my job to become more direct and plain speaking and clear about the act itself, there's very little that I have to say anymore. I mean, I can talk. God knows I can talk. But there's very little I have to say of any consequence. I talk about the fear of life. Anything you want me to talk about? Anybody have something they'd like to hear me talk about? No?
I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you were talking about this morning about when you look at yourself, somehow it's the part that you're protecting or something. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. So.
Okay. And you?
It was going to be a question, but maybe you could clarify this a little bit for me. The subtle difference between emptiness and looking at oneself.
Okay, we have one. Somebody wants to know what I meant by you're looking at that which you're trying to protect, right?
Yeah.
And you wanted me to talk a little bit about the difference between emptiness and me, I guess, right?
Yes.
Okay. Here's the thing about the business about you're looking at what you're trying to protect. And I don't think I've ever actually put it that way before. It just popped into my mind and came out of my mouth without too much consideration. But it does actually strike me as being very apt for a couple reasons. One is the simple, plain fact that you are perceived to be the entity that requires the protection of endless vigilance and evaluation of all rising phenomena. That's that you're the one that's being protected by that activity. That's exactly what you are. Now, like I talked to, was it Liz I was talking to about that? Yeah, and I talked to Liz about that. It was interesting that she had heard that or acted on it as if it were the kind of cluster of infantile insecurities and need for reassurance and things of that nature, because that seems to be the thing that wants to be protected. But I'm not asking you to look at the thing that wants to be protected. I'm asking you to look at the thing that is being protected by all of this hypervigilance and evaluation and, figuring out this and that, the other thing. It's not the one that wants to be protected. Now, there was a time, and this is interesting, I'm actually glad you brought this up. There was a time when I used to advise people, and this was in a time when I was still struggling mightily to see my way through the fog of my own understandings and so forth. But there was a time when I used to advise people to, and I did this because of my own experience. And my own experience, of course, started from no idea at all what I was doing. Well, I used to advise people to find within themselves this kind of knot of neediness and insecurity and infantile dependency and so forth and so on. And I used to advise them to find that knot of insecurity and infantilism and focus on it with great vigor. And I did that because that had been effective for me in the period of time when I was without any idea of how to recover from the collapse of my enlightenment, my so-called enlightenment, and had turned to try to understand. And I don't know, I'm going to relate this to you guys. Probably most of you have heard it before, and maybe all of you have heard it before, but you're going to hear it again in this context because it makes sense. I spent a year and a half in a state of a constant kind of, I guess, awareness of non-dual consciousness. A year and a half of no sense of any identity, no sense of anything other than the wonder of it all. No sense of real time passing or anything of the kind. That collapsed, and the circumstances that surrounded its collapse are beside the point. But that collapsed and left me bereft, and really in a state of torment and agony and regret and so forth and so on. I decided that during that period of time, coming out of that, and in that torment, I decided that I was going to, that what I needed to do was not find a way to reclaim the state of what I had so fondly called enlightenment, not try to reclaim that, to get back to that, but that itself was false and a false promise, and what I really had to do was find a way to destroy within me all hope whatsoever that there was anything to be done about the basic stupidity and brutishness of human life. That I wanted to destroy all hope. And for whatever reason, and it's not necessary that this makes sense to the one who is listening to it, because it made sense to the tormented crazy person here when I did it. I decided that Ramana Maharshi, I'm sure you've all heard of Ramana Maharshi, that Ramana Maharshi was unique among the gurus and teachers and so forth that I had read, and God knows I had read a whole lot of stuff about that. And that he was unique for a number of reasons, and I'm not going to go into them in detail right now. But one of the reasons was because it seemed to me that consistently, although it often seemed to be buried in spiritual lingo and spiritual context and so forth, that he consistently had something that he wanted us to do. There was something he wanted us to do, and I couldn't figure out what it was from just what he was saying. What he was saying was, who? Who are you? For whom is this joy? For whom is this misery? For whom is this confusion? Who are you? And that didn't make any sense to me. I knew who I was, after all. I was infinite eternal consciousness, unhampered by any who-ness at all. But I thought that since Ramana was, for one thing, recent, he hadn't been dead as long as most of them had been dead, and for another thing, was unique in the history of the development of his own realization, and unique in the way that he was received by the other spiritual teachers of his time, which was with hostility and antagonism. That's how he was greeted by them. I decided that I would turn to the act that Ramana, I knew that he wanted us to do something, and that who wasn't it. That was just the way it came out. But there was something behind that who am I that was fundamental and profound, and that if I could find what it was that he actually wanted us to do, I would find it to be false and be done with hope. It seemed obvious to me that the whole business of hope for salvation or reconciliation or redemption or anything of the kind was just made up, just, some story we tell like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. So I thought that if I could find what Ramana, because he had an act, he clearly had an act that he wanted us to perform. And I thought that if I could find what Ramana wanted us to do and do it, then I could rid myself of this foolishness and get back to, getting high and trying to get money and trying to be the king of the world and things of that nature. And I spent considerable amount of time. I had a considerable amount of time because I was in prison and didn't have to work and so forth. And I spent a considerable amount of time reading talks, the thick, red-covered talks. And one of the things that Ramana suggested in the course of his attempt to explain to us what it was that happened to him, one of the things that Ramana suggested was that and this, by the way, is one of the things that attracted me to Ramana, was that we should grab ego by the throat. And this was so, sacrilegious or something, to somebody steeped in non-dual understanding and Advaita Vedanta teachings and so forth, that somebody of his stature could suggest that there was such a thing as ego, whose throat could be grabbed and strangled. That I started to do that myself. One of the things I did with great energy and conviction. And I would sit on my bunk and I would try to find that knot of neediness and blame and hurt and desire and wanting something, that infantile, the baby thing. And I would try to find some sensation within my consciousness, my body, of course, that answered to that name, to that set of characteristics, which of course is easy to do. If you start looking for it, I guarantee you'll find it. You conjure it up in the act of looking for it, right? So I would find something like that or conjure it up, and I would fix it with the beam of my attention, the death ray of my attention, and I would mutter to it, die, die, die. And then after, I suppose weeks of doing that many times during the day, I did it once and it occurred to me, well, this thing ain't never going to die. And I laughed and moved on. But then, later on, when I'm now I'm out here, meeting with folks like you and knowing that there's something I really want to get across and I don't exactly know how to do it, but I have on occasion suggested to people that one thing that can be done is to do that, to find what feels like ego, to find what feels like the infantile, childish, spoiled brat that thinks that mommy isn't taking care of it and wants more and isn't getting what it wants and so forth, and focus your attention on that. And the truth is that if you focus your attention on any arising phenomena within your mind, if you focus your attention on it, it'll disappear. It's just the case. It's like dissolving clouds. So if you focus your attention on that, it will disappear. And I suggested to people, so I thought, that when it disappears, what you'll be looking at is you. In that second, in that split second. I have since come to see that that indirection is not worth doing, since the direct approach to it is so available to everybody and so easy to do. I mean, easy from my point of view, maybe not from yours, but is so easy to do since it's just you, that it has become really clear to me that those kind of means that are indirect are a waste of our time. And as human beings, we only have so much time. So when I talk about the one who you are trying to protect, I'm talking about you, and not that little knot of infantile neediness and so forth. You know, there's nothing wrong with looking at that, but that's indirect, and it seems to me, and this is from experience of my own and also with the reports of many, many people now, it seems to me that a critical element of this act, a critical element of its effectiveness and the speed with which it actually accomplishes what you intended to accomplish, is the clarity of your own intent. There's something about the intent that seems to be extremely powerful in this act. So that if you have the intent, for example, of finding self, you're going to be a long time looking for what I want you to see. Or if you have the intent of finding emptiness, for example, it's going to be a long time before you ever stumble upon what it is that I'm trying to get you to actually get a taste of, or any other abstraction having to do with you. If you're looking for who am I, also, it's going to take a long time before that who can conceivably lead you to the actual experience of the reality of you, here, now, in this moment.